Welcome to the Podcasting Gear Show, where we open up the studio doors and look at the equipment, the software, and the apps, and the plugins that make it all happen, that podcasters like yourself can't live without. And now, here's your host, Scott Herzog. Welcome to episode 7. I am your podcasting guru today, guiding you through the variety of podcasting gear, apps, equipment, and software that can razzle and dazzle your show. I have with me today Wayne Henderson from the MediaVoiceovers.com website, which hosts a variety of podcasts. He hosts the Lost podcast, the Fringe Casting with Wayne and Dan podcast, and the Packers fan podcast, which, by the way, I don't know why you'd ever have a Packers fan podcast, Wayne. Sorry about that. Steelers fan podcast, all the way, baby. Anyways, tonight, we are going to be talking about the dynamic microphone, the famous Heil PR 40 that he uses to make his voice sound so succulent, sweet, and rich. Maybe succulent isn't the right word, but so rich and warm. It is a wonderful, wonderful microphone to have. By the way, much of the gear that we do mention on this show is available at our podcasting gear store, which you can find at podcastingguru.com/podcasting gear. And you'll find the variety of gear there, gear that we mention in the show, gear that I'm using and I can recommend. So if you're looking to kind of build your studio, you're saying, I want to get into podcasting, what's some of the gear that, Scott uses or some of the guests that he is interviewing uses, you can find it all there. And along with that, links to many of the shows that discuss that gear as well. The temptation might be to say, as I release each episode and we talk about new and flashy pieces of gear, apps, software, plugins, and so on, is to say, ooh, I need that. But I'm going to encourage you to buy at your discretion. Just because people are talking and are passionate about what they use, A, doesn't mean that's going to fit into your studio setup, and B, maybe it doesn't fit into your goals, and C, we as podcasters suffer a debilitating syndrome. We suffer from GAS. That is gear acquisition syndrome. I would encourage you to look at your studio and say, what do we really need? And if you do need something, head on over to podcastingguru.com/podcasting gear. But if you don't buy it. Use what you need. If you have any questions, do I need this? Please email me or shoot me a voicemail, and I'd be happy to talk with you about it. So last week, we talked about what it means to have a condenser microphone when I talked with Scott Roche about his CAD GXL 2200. Since this week, we're chatting with Wayne Henderson about his Heil PR 40, a dynamic microphone, and makes sense to look at what exactly that means. Now, like the condenser microphone, the components are essentially the same, but they're put together in a slightly different way. The dynamic, like the condenser, has a diaphragm, but unlike the condenser, it's not a straight sheet. It's kind of wrapped in a coil, and it's not free floating like a condenser is. I have a diagram I'll put on the website at podcastingguru.com/dynamic. The diaphragm is attached to a coil of fine wire. Now that coil is mounted in the air gap kind of in the middle of the magnet such that it is free to move back and forth within the gap. Now this is crucial for a dynamic microphone. When a sound, like when you're speaking as a podcaster into your microphone, the sound wave enters the microphone, strikes the diaphragm, shaking it. The diaphragm vibrates, and the coil attached to the diaphragm moves back and forth kind of in the field of the magnet, kind of in that gap. The coil moves through the lines of the magnetic force in the gap, and a small electrical current is induced into the wire. The magnitude and the direction of that current is directly related to the motion of the coil. So if you're speaking louder, vibrates more. Speaking less, smaller vibration. The current then is an electrical representation of your sound wave. Now, one of the major drawbacks of the dynamic microphone relates to the fact that this diaphragm is just bigger and has a bigger mass with the moving coil. Due to the mass, the dynamic mic has a poor transient response. If you will remember last week, that is how quickly it responds to changes in my voice. So if I have subtle changes in the sound wave, it doesn't respond as quickly as a condenser does. And therefore, it's less sensitive on average than the condenser mic. This is crucial if you're trying to capture live sound, or if you're maybe at a convention somewhere and you're trying to capture the ambient noise. Maybe not quite as crucial when you're in the studio and you're trying to weed out ambient noise, and the dynamic may be a better microphone in that case. Crown Magnetics was awesome in providing some of this information. Go over and check out their site. If you have a term you'd like me to address in this show, please email me at podcastingguru@gmail.com. Well, Wayne Henderson is here with us. And Wayne, welcome to Inside the Studio of the Podcaster.
Thank you so much for having me on, Scott. It's got this nice new inside the studio smell to it, this new podcast. I love it.
Well, it's definitely new. You're still shaking out the cobwebs and everything else. My understanding is you're trying to do a little bit of new work in your studio as well, for that matter. Cleaning it up.
It's a time of year where I realize that it's turned to total chaos. So it's time to spring clean, straighten up, and I got a few little things in the works.
Yeah, you have to. So, I mean, I guess the real question is, and maybe you don't want to let the cat out of the bag, and if so, we can edit this out. But rumor has it you might be messing around with some video.
That's a rumor that I've heard somewhere.
Okay. All right. So, well, you'll have to stay tuned by visiting Wayne's website. We'll talk about that here in just a little bit. So let me back up a little bit and let's give our listeners a little bit of the history of Wayne, because the reality is that prior to podcasting was not your first foray into audio work.
No, there's one, of course, when I was only about 11 years old, I was playing down in my father's basement with whatever microphone he might have brought home, and I would pretend to be a DJ or a podcaster. And then I also went into radio broadcasting, and I did a lot of work at local radio stations in Palm Springs, Redlands, and stuff, playing country and rock music on air on the weekends. And so that was kind of my first foray and got me hooked on, working the microphone and trying to have fun with that.
And then you eventually got into podcasting. When did that happen for you?
That happened, I started getting into it in the spring of 2005 when I had read a newspaper article about this thing called podcasting. And I was intrigued immediately, so started doing research. And then Todd Cochran came out with the first book on how to podcast. And I read that a couple of times and started coming up with ideas, and then launched in August of 2005 with Tuning In with Wayne Henderson, because I thought I'll just talk about everything and not even have a niche. Bad mistake.
Yeah. Well, but a learning mistake probably for you.
Yeah, not a mistake to do the show, but I should have been a little more focused. But hey, what did I know? At least I started.
So since then, it seems like you've done a gazillion podcasts. Tell us about some of the podcasts that you've done and some of the ones that you're doing currently.
Okay, previously, the most notable as far as I look at it is my Lost podcast that I did with my friend Dan and focused on the TV show Lost, coincidentally enough. And then, of course, it perfectly segued into Fringe casting with Wayne and Dan, and we continued with the TV show Fringe. And there was this awesome segment on there called the Fringe Quote of the Week that Scott from the Sci-Fi Diner. Oh, that's you. You would send those
I
in.
have no clue who that
those,
is.
those were awesome. And then right now, as we wait for summer and the return of Under the Dome Radio with my co-host Troy, and of course, about that time, football season will kick in. So my other co-host, Dallin, does the Packers Fan Podcast. But right now, the ones we're doing, me and Troy have a new one we just launched recently, Resurrection Revealed, all about the ABC TV show Resurrection. And then, just to be totally crazy, we do 2 TV shows in a row. Right after Resurrection on Sunday nights is Revenge, and we also do a brief revenge show for the TV Talk Network. So TV.
It's all about TV. It is, and congratulations, by the way, on making it into the new and notable page for your Revelation Revealed podcast.
Oh, you noticed that. Thank you so much, Scott.
I did notice it. So if you guys are watching television and are interested in finding out either more about the show or you're watching the show, it's a podcast you definitely don't want to miss. Now, for someone that's interested in finding out more about you and where they can get a hold of all this great content that you've created, where would they find that?
Probably the main spot I would like people to check out if they're interested is mediavoiceovers.com. And that has all the information regarding all of my shows except for the Resurrection Revealed and Under the Dome shows, which are part of Daniel Lewis's Noodle Mix network. So if you just go to underthedomeradio.com or even resurrectionrevealed.com, you can find out about those shows is there. And we'll try to have links pointing back and forth between the two. So you don't have to write down all these URLs.
Yeah, I'll definitely throw them up in the show notes for this show. So the reason that we have you on here is to talk microphones. So can you tell us a little bit about the microphone that you are currently using?
Currently using at this very moment and probably for about 4 years now, using the Heil PR 40.
Nice. And have you always used a Heil PR 40 in your podcasting?
I would have if I could have. I don't think it existed when I first started in 2005. Plus, I didn't really know about it at the time. It wasn't out just yet, I believe. When I first started, my first 2 or 3 years, I was using a Marshall MXL. I think it was a 990. It had its own phantom power kit that came with it. So if I wanted to ever move to a different room, I had to lug all these extra cables and things like that. And then heard about the Heil PR 40 first from Leo Laporte and then Cliff Ravenscraft. And I looked at the price and it wasn't that much more than the Marshall MXL that I had. So I figured if it's good enough for those guys and they could afford, far more expensive microphones, then it's good enough for me.
Yeah. So, you what, I guess the question, other than the recommendation, was there anything else that kind of impressed you about the Heil as you were looking at it?
At first, to be honest, I mostly went on the recommendation and some of the descriptions that Leo Laporte was telling about the microphone. And I figured, I definitely wanted to try it out. And from the instant I plugged it in, I haven't rehooked up that Marshall MXL. I still have it around as an emergency backup. But I've been very happy with the Heil PR40. I don't see any reason to change at this present time. It's worked great, flawlessly, haven't had any problems. And I think it sounds pretty darn good.
Yeah. So, So I guess when you switch from the Marshall to the Heil, that really brings up the question. What did you notice about the quality of sound, the sound of your voice through that microphone? Because obviously that's important for podcasters out there who are looking to kind of bring the best sound to the people that listen to them. What makes the Heil work for you? I mean, what about it?
For me, some of the things I noticed were just kind of nuances. The Heil just brought out a little more, I guess you would call it presence in my voice. It just sounded more broadcast ready through the Heil. On the other side of things, the more subjective side, was the fact that it doesn't pick up quite as much of the area noise. When I was using the Marshall MXL, I definitely, for that model, at least in my neighborhood, I had to go into the closet surrounded by a lot of clothes to make sure that I cut out every bit of outdoor noise that I possibly could, because I do have neighbors a couple of houses down that, especially in the summertime, love to play loud mariachi music. Okay. Not conducive to podcasting, but it does
No.
give you a festive feeling. But
Maybe
with
that
the
depends.
Heil,
Maybe that depends on the podcast you're running. But
well, that's true. That's true. It had a lost feel to it, I suppose. But with the Heil, it doesn't seem to pick up as much of that stuff. Plus, I have a little more of a little soundproofing portable box set up around the microphone. So unless somebody's playing their rap music very loudly as they cruise down right outside my studio window, it doesn't seem to pick up much.
You know, just so that everyone's aware, I use the Heil PR40 as well, and I base my recommendation off of Cliff Ravenscraft, who you, of course, heard talk about it as well, and it was an early addition to my podcasting studio. And I started podcasting. I mean, my starting to podcasting was using the onboard microphone on the computer, which, you know, when you're starting out is, you know, you can get a decent sound out of it, but. And then I switched. I was in a band for many years, and I was using SM58s. Well, they're great stage microphones, but not necessarily the best podcasting. And I noticed it in particular just a few weeks ago again when I was doing editing. I recently purchased a Zoom X16.
Nice.
Yeah, it is. It allows me to record every single track separately. So what I noticed when I was listening to my Heil track, for the Sci-Fi Diner podcast, for example, no hiss, just nothing in the background. It was just pure, just me talking, and no hiss at all. Miles, same levels, same type of microphone cords and everything. There was a slight hiss underneath the microphone. So there was just a little bit more residual hiss running through. I don't know if it's the way the conducers or the way it's wired. It just allows for a little bit of sound. Now, when you're singing into a microphone with the full band behind you, no one notices.
Exactly. And we certainly don't want to blame the hiss on Miles himself. He doesn't carry around that noise with him.
No. But just for our listeners, I'm going to demonstrate. I don't know if you'll be able to hear this, Wayne, but when I go back and edit, I guarantee I will be. I'm going to flip from my Heil microphone, which I'm speaking into right now, over to the SM58. So just give me a second here. All right, so right now I am speaking through the SM58 that my co-host uses, and you can kind of, you should be able to hear a little bit of hiss if you listen closely. It may depend on how you're listening to this podcast, but for an audiophile, you know, that little hiss sometimes can bug you. So I'm going to flip back over to my Heil, but I just wanted to give you a taste of what a lower end microphone might give you if you use it. And you know, the old adage, you get what you pay for, is true to some degree. All right, I am back on my Heil PR40 here. I'm back.
Welcome back,
okay.
Scott.
Okay, wait, I'm here. So, but could you hear anything at your end? I doubt it.
On my end, it sounded the same. It might just be how the setup is sending through Skype.
Yeah, it is. But you know, and that brings up another thing. When you run a podcast, and you like when I export my podcast as a wave, by the time they get compressed down to an MP3 file, there's certainly some lost in the integrity of the signal. And the real question is, how much do you notice? For me, I tend to notice just little things like that because I've been in audio so long. But for some people, it may not bother them. And you know, if you can only afford, if it's a cheaper microphone that you need when you first get started, there's nothing wrong with a lot. There's a lot of cheaper options. But if you're looking for something that's real good broadcast quality, the Heil PR40 certainly seems to do the job.
Oh, absolutely. And of course, even more important than that, like you alluded to, Scott, when you started with just the microphone in your computer, as long as you just start podcasting, put out episodes, and you'll just build up to it. And as you get addicted to doing podcasting, you'll definitely move up to, like you said, the Shure SM58s or beyond, and just kind of go from there.
Yeah. You know, and that's so true. I mean, so entry level for a Heil right now is $327, and my understanding is that's a drop in price. Wasn't it around 400 or it used to be?
I don't recall.
Yeah, I don't either.
It's hovered around the same price, pretty close anyway.
Yeah. So $327 if you buy it from Heil itself. And I actually wasn't aware of this because I rarely go to the Heil site, but they actually have a whole lineup of broadcast microphones. The Heil PR30, the Heil PR20, and each one, of course, gets progressively less. But you kind of, you kind of do get what you pay for in sound. And I too value the opinions of Leo Laporte and Cliff Ravenscraft and even you, Wayne. But seriously. But there is some benefit to sinking some money into a good microphone, because here's the reality: is you can get the best editing software, you can get the best recorder, and make the fanciest web page you want. But if you have a microphone that's giving you noise or somehow is giving you a little bit of feedback or whatever it is it's doing, it's really difficult to take that stuff out. And so if you start with a good microphone, the rest of it becomes just a little bit easier.
Oh, very well said. It's kind of the same of the people that might take a really fuzzy, terrible digital picture and then take it to someone and ask them, "Hey, can you make this clear?
Yeah, can you clean this up? Can you clean this up?"
Start clear and go from there. Good point.
No, and that's just my thought. But now with your Heil, do you have it on like the whole suspension kit that they kind of send with it?
No, but that's something that I do have in mind for future. Mine just came by itself in those cute little imitation anvil flight cases. I love the little box that came in.
Mine's still flying around here somewhere.
mine as well. I just saw it yesterday when I was doing some studio cleanup. I do eventually want to set up something along those lines. Right now it's mounted on a kind of the type of mic stand that you would use in concert, to mic maybe an amplifier speaker. And so it's mounted on that right at mouth height inside a little portable soundproof box that I built from a kit that I saw online.
Well, nice. Yeah, mine's mounted. Mine came with the shock mount, I believe, when I bought it.
Nice.
So, but I have mine mounted then on a boom microphone stand from my band days that I'm using, and then I have a shorter. Then Miles SM58 is mounted on a shorter version of the same thing, but. Yeah. So is there anything else that we need to tell people about the Heil PR40?
Not. The only thing I can think of is I know that a lot of people, that if you listen to a lot of podcasts, you've probably heard so many people talk about the Heil PR40 that your eyes are, you might glaze over or think, yeah, somehow that one just happened to be the microphone that caught on. But it really is a great microphone for the price because, of course, some people, if you're really going top end and you really money's no object, there's all those like extra expensive microphones that radio stations use. It seems like they all use the same one, but those are so cost prohibitive that, and I know $300 isn't exactly cheap, but if it's in your budget and you're really addicted to podcasting, for the money, like you alluded to earlier, Scott, it's so sturdy, so good, so versatile that it's just a standard piece, and I don't know how I would be able to podcast very well if I was still using the Marshall MXL and lugging around phantom power that probably, I just had cords everywhere.
Yeah. And for the money, I don't think you're going to get a clearer sound. I really don't. But, well, Wayne, I just want to say thanks for coming on and chatting about the Heil PR40 here.
Oh, thanks for having me on. It's great and exciting to have your new podcast launching. These are good times.
Yeah, it is. It's exciting to be a part of it.
In the heart of the Midwest, a mystery is brewing.
I want you to explain to me why a federal agency would issue a report for a boy who died 32 years ago.
In the heart of a family, faith is being tested.
The DNA test came back. Jacob is your son, Mr. Lex.
In the heart of the listeners, questions will rise.
Did I die? Did we all die?
Noodle Mix Network, in partnership with MediaVoiceovers.com, proudly present the one podcast that will get to the heart of what it truly means to be alive. Join Wayne Henderson and Troy Heinrichs for Resurrection Revealed. Watch ABC's Resurrection, then subscribe to get to the heart of each episode. Follow on Twitter at Resurrection Pod and listen all season at resurrectionrevealed.com.
Now, if you like the sound of the Heil PR 40, you can order them through me by going to podcastingguru.com/Heil PR 40. That's HEIL PR 40. I have been using the Heil PR 40 for 5 years. It is durable, has great sound, and comes recommended by Leo Laporte and many, many other podcasters, including Wayne Henderson, which you just heard. It is seriously worth every cent you pay for it. Again, you can find it at podcastingguru.com/Heil PR 40. So far, there have been no takers on the soundbite deal. Maybe I made the contest too complicated, but I guarantee that if you don't have kind of a sound rack where you can kind of put all your sound effects, all your intros and outros, and maybe commercials, it is an awesome device that is functional both in the Mac and PC and on iOS devices. And if you want a free copy of Soundbite, you just have to email me and let me know that you want it. No hoops to jump through this time. We're going to try and make it easier. And if you aren't sure what Soundbite is and want to check out the episode I did, you can go to podcastingguru.com/soundbite. And there's a lot of URLs in the show. But I believe that is it. Until next time, keep podcasting, stay learning, and keep